Hi, guys. It's Anna, and welcome to this week's mini episode of Astrology with Anna. So, when I was doing my poll this weekend, I think I did it a bit late, but I got it on Saturday and then Sunday, and I think I did one Monday too. I did 2 days, so I can't remember which of those 2 days, but I did them on 2 different days. And I didn't really get any questions. So, instead, I thought what I would do is basically answer a question I always have, or just answer, a question I want to know more about. And one question that's always on my mind in terms of astrology is, how do I find success or fulfillment in my life based on my birth chart? Like, where in my chart can I really understand what things I can do best or follow in order to find more fulfillment, how I can find personal success, that kind of stuff. And because that's what I'm always, because literally that's what I'm always wondering. I'm always like, how can I use my chart, like my understanding of astrology, to my advantage to get more success, to figure out what I'm supposed to be doing, to, push myself a little farther in life, to sometimes I'm like, how do I get more money? Sometimes how do I, get more opportunities, stuff like that. But when I think of that question, usually I think a lot of people might think of Jupiter, or they might look at the 10th house, or they might look at, Sagittarius or Pisces and where that is, if they have it in their chart, or where it lies in their chart, like over what houses. But when I think of success and fulfillment in each personal birth chart, I just think of the North Node, I think of the how the way to really understand how you're going to find success and fulfillment that works for you personally in your life is looking at the North Node, where it lies in your chart, what other things it's connected to, what sign it's in, what sign or what planet rules over it, that kind of stuff. So that's what I'm going to get into for this mini episode today. So, looking at my own chart. So I'm going to pull up my chart on my end. This is not a video episode. Many episodes are all audio, but I will describe what I'm saying as clearly as possible so you can really get the gist too. So in my birth chart, I have a Leo North Node. And then on the other side of that spectrum, I also have an Aquarius South Node. Knowing about your South Node and also what's connected to it is very important in terms of success too, because it can tell you what's holding you back. Because the South Node is the direct opposite of the North Node and vice versa. And so whatever conjuncts the South Node oppositions the North Node. Whatever squares the North Node also squares the South Node. You slowly get a sense of what everything means, or whatever sextiles North Node, will trine the South Node, stuff like that. You understand the aspects. They kind of run they basically are on opposite sides of the spectrum, because they are opposite sides of the spectrum. But it's important to understand both the South Node and the North Node to understand just wholly the North Node, or to understand how to really find success. So back in my chart, I have a North Node in Leo, right? And so off the bat, that tells me a lot about, just off the bat, when I think of the Aquarius Leo axis, I think of, okay, there's doing and there's thinking. There's passive and there's active. Aquarius is more passive and thinking. Leo is more active and doing. Those are just two key words that in my mind really describe that axis, like sum it up, a good amount of summing up of them. Because for me, I also have a rising in Aquarius. And so my whole life, I've been more, for most of my life, I've acted more passively. I've been more of a thinker than a doer. And so it really tells me how my life has been very karmic so far. How I've lived very karmically because my south node is so close to my ascendant. Technically, in my chart, my south node is in my 12th house. And obviously, your ascendant is the first house. And so it's a little bit behind my ascendant. So it's in the 12th house, technically, but it is closely conjunct the first house. And so we kind of have two houses pulling some weight onto my south node. And then vice versa, the same thing's happening for my north node. Because my north node is in the 6th house. Again, it's in Leo. And then it's closely conjunct the 7th house. It's in, I think, 2 or 3 degree orbs. So orbs is just like the number of how close it is to something. So say, for instance, you have a sun, like I'm just going to use my chart, for example, because it's right in front of me. I have a sun that's in 29 degrees Cancer, and then I have a Mercury in 5 degrees I have a Mercury in 5 degrees Mercury. I have a Mercury in 5 degrees Leo. And so they're conjunct, but they're not a close conjunction. They're about 6 degrees apart. And an orb is the amount of degrees apart two things are. So since my sun and my Mercury are 6 orbs apart, it's not the most intense aspect. Aspects are more intense the closer the orb. So if it's a 0 degree orb, it's a very intense aspect because they're on top of each other, whether it's a conjunction or, trine, sextile, opposition, square. It shows the lesser the orb, the more intense the aspect. But to go back to North Node, my North Node, like I said, is in Leo. It's in the 6th house, but closely conjunct the 7th house. And it's at 13 degrees. These are important things to start really looking at in terms of your North Node. You really honestly just want to look at it in your chart and study it. Like, what house is it? Like, well, first of all, what sign is it in? That's very important. That's very important to really start understanding what you need to start walking towards in your current life. What themes in your life are that will lead you to more fulfillment, to more happiness, to a more likelihood chance of success. Because if you follow too much of your south node, you'll find, more likely less success, or your success will be closely tied to karma. Like, one thing that I think a North Node aspect that I think about quite often is the 4th and the 10th house axis, and how having a North Node in the 4th house and a South Node in the 10th house is so interesting. I think you see it a lot with like celebrities too, or people who become celebrities or become famous very early on in their life. I think an example I once looked at was Billie Eilish, where she has a 10th house South Node and a 4th house North Node. And it makes sense because she became famous fairly early in her life when she was still, I think, a teen. And although fame is considered success, it may not be that person's needed success. So South Node isn't necessarily not tied with success, because you can still technically be successful and be really still hardcore, maybe following a lot of the South Node, the karmic themes in your life, but you may not end up happy. Bad or karmic things might continue to happen to you. You might live life with a lot of unfulfillment or a lot of, nagging kind of intuition sitting on your chest, being like, is this actually what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I living like the life that I need to be living in this lifetime? That kind of stuff. So you really want to look at sign, the house, or if it's conjunct or closely conjunct, like with me, where it's just like, I have a North Node in the 6th house, it's sitting in there, but it's really close to the 7th house, so you have to take that into account. And it's a relatively close conjunction, a small orb. So that's, something to take into account. And then you also want to look at degree. I think degree, if you start to understand or if you start to look into degree theory, it really adds another layer onto the theming of your life, And in North Node, you can get a grasp of what energy you kind of need to hold on to yourself, like a deeper level of that energy, on top of the sign and the house. But I think degree theory is really interesting. It's not something I'm going to go in much today, but if you're ever interested in really understanding the degree of any of your planets or your asteroids or kind of important points like the North Node, I would say just look up the sign, whatever degree it is. So like say for me, I'd be searching in the search bar, Leo 13 degrees, and then see what comes up. Usually a site, Mindfire, which talks about Sabian symbols, and then there's another site, here, let me look it up. Sabian symbols, yeah, there's one called Sabian Mysteries that talks about Sabian symbols. Mindfire.ca is one I like a lot. And then I also go on aquaorfire.net, which gives you another kind of layer into degrees and degree theory and, what they're trying to say about degree theory. I think it's interesting because my Sabian symbol for Leo at 13 degrees is an old sea captain rocking. And I find this theme so interesting because this is why I like degree theory, because, again, I like the added layer and really understanding the full grasp of what you're trying to look at. But I'll quickly explain what my Sabian symbol for my North Node is, which is an old sea captain bides his time, for he knows the shifting of tides, feels it in his bones, sees the signs of the wind and wave. And what I've understood from this quote, and I forget who wrote all these, probably Sabian or whoever wrote all the Sabian symbols, I don't know. I need to actually do more research into that. But what I find interesting about Leo at 13 degrees is it's not as direct. It's an area. 13 degrees is all the degrees have certain, what is it, like signs they're attached to. So 13 is an Aries degree, and so it's not, even though Leo and Aries are these very active, very intense signs, Leo at 13 degrees is very, it's a very selective degree where it's like you really have to pay attention and listen to your intuition about what you need to reach out on creatively, about what you need to be active on. When they're talking about this old sea captain, they're really talking about someone who understands his craft really well, and he knows exactly when to strike. And so in terms of my life, in terms of what I need to walk towards, I've had trouble with picking too much or too little, not acting enough, acting too much. And it's really about understanding, first of all, listening to your intuition, which is a very powerful thing for anyone, being very attuned into that, and then knowing exactly when to strike. Knowing when, for the sea captain, when when he needs to go back to sea. He knows his craft, and he's just kind of waiting until the moment he needs to leave strikes. And so that's kind of a quick explanation of this Sabian symbol. But I think they're really interesting, and I think they give a lot of nuance to what astrology, or to what each of your parts of your chart are. And you can look at Sabian symbols for everything. You can look at it for the house degree. You could look at for the sign, for like your sun sign. You could look at it for asteroids. Anything that has a degree to it, you can really start looking at it. But that's a really quick thing. But like I said, you really want to grasp all those different parts of your North Node and just start studying them. Like I say, look them up. Look up North Node in Leo. Look up North Node in the 6th house. And if you have it closely conjunct to another house, you can just look up North Node in the 7th house, or North Node conjunct the 7th house. You can look up, and then another part is really understanding the aspects to your North Node. That's the next part I want to talk about. Understanding what other planets are connected can really tell you, and especially what types of aspects those are, can really tell you what's holding you back, what's aiding you in your, your life at the moment. And again, what's hurting you, and like I said, pulling you back. And so for me, it's going to go next in my notes. My major aspects hitting my north node and my south node. So I have north node opposite Uranus, which is therefore, which is also, in terms of south node conjunct Uranus. And then I have north and south node square Saturn. And then I have some more. I have like a square Mars to my north node. I have north node conjunct Mercury, north node trine Pluto. But those are a little farther orbs. I would say in your chart, look at anything 8 orbs or below. So like 8 degrees apart or below. You really don't want to go above that. Because there's still, some things going on with larger orbs, but they don't hit as hard in your chart. They don't hit as hard in your, who you are. And so you want to look at the most close ones because those have the ability to tell you the most. And so in today's mini episode, I'm mainly going to talk about my north node opposite Uranus and my north node square Saturn, because those are the closest and the most intense in my chart, because they're only two degrees apart. Both my Uranus and my Saturn are at 15 degrees, and then my north node's at 13 degrees, and my south node's at the same degree. But what's also, I think, interesting about my specific chart, and something you could potentially look at, is, your big 3, and then your chart ruler. So, like, sun, moon, and rising, are those hitting your south or north node? Or, like for me, again, my north node's opposite my rising, but also your chart ruler. What is your chart ruler? In my chart rulers, because I like to, have nuance, and so I take on both the traditional and the modern chart rulers for my chart. And I'm an Aquarius rising, so I look at both Uranus and I look at Saturn. And funny enough, like if you know a lot about astrology and you're already catching my drift, Saturn and Uranus, which are my chart rulers, are the 2 planets that are most closely aspecting my north node and south node. So for my Uranus, it's actually conjunct my south node and therefore opposite my north node. And then my Saturn is square both my south node and my north node. And so it really tells me in my life what's truly holding me back, especially noting, that my chart ruler, both my chart rulers, are what one would consider negatively aspecting my, my path. And so, I don't know, I've lost my thought, but I think if you already know about astrology and you're catching my drift, you can kind of already know what's going on in my head and how, what's going on. But if you don't know, it's very hard to deal with, I think, anything like a 7th house north node or your chart ruler oppositioning your, your north node, where you're supposed to be headed towards, especially when again, having your chart ruler conjunct your south node means that you deal with a lot of karma on a daily basis, and it's very hard for you to get out of living very karmically. And so a lot of my life, like I said, has been vehement, like, I don't want to say vehemently, but I've acted very passive, especially in my childhood, where I was never able to fully commit to creative opportunities. I couldn't focus that easily, or it was really just like, when you look at my south node in the 12th house, there's a lot of depression there. There's like a lot of things where it's like I can't fully grasp my mental health. And so I have a really hard time, putting in the time and effort, the 6th house themes, the schedule, into really prioritizing my creative projects, creativity, creating, doing. That's all Leo kind of themes. And that's what I want to be headed towards. And so for me, when I look at what's blocking my success, what's stopping me from really grasping, or more, you could look at it as like balancing the north and the south node, or just trying to head towards that north node success. What's stopping me from getting there? Well, it's an overemphasis on that Uranus, and then especially to my Saturn, because they're both closely aspected. My Uranus and my Saturn are at basically the same degree. Well, they are. It's like I think my Uranus is like 15.29, and then my Saturn's 15.49, something like that. But yeah, it's really what's blocking me. And what's blocking me is kind of like my very outer core. Or I don't really look at ascendant as really the outer core. I just really look at it as kind of the way you just walk through life naturally, where there's not a lot of thought into how you act. That's just how naturally you act, while your sun sign's really that ego, what you consider yourself as, while the ascendant is just how you are without much thought, the things you attach to yourself without much thought, the natural habits that you do. And so a lot of the way I run naturally doesn't help me creatively. It doesn't help me really attain what I want to attain. It's, for me, I consider myself, especially since I have a Saturn in Taurus, I definitely easily fall into comforts as well. Where it's like, I'll consider comforting myself better than actually getting something done, which is very hard. But to go back to each of the aspects, opposite is really, to really understand the opposite and understanding, especially in terms of the North Nodes, when you have a planet opposite the North Node, it's really a Texas standoff in terms of, it's opposite, really, think of it as like a classic Texas standoff, just two people at two ends. I think that's what a Texas standoff is. Texas standoff. Definition. Well, regardless if that's what it means or not. Just basically, I'm trying to say, like, just two opposite sides of the spectrum pointing their guns at each other without much action necessarily happening. It's just who will shoot the first shot, what's going to happen. It's two signs that are diametrically opposed that obviously have similarities because they're two sides of a coin, but they're facing opposite sides. They don't see each other's point. And so how do you really resolve that? It's really through a lot of balance. And I think another good way to really understand that balance is also through the other axis of connected to Aquarius and Leo, which is Scorpio and Taurus. I think where it's just like, again, regardless, even if my Saturn wasn't in Taurus, I think it definitely brings another layer to my chart and my understanding my North Node and kind of getting to that level of success is, that axis, because it sits in the middle. It's the middle area. It's the middle ground. So understanding those two signs in order to really get that success for myself is also really important. Trying to find all that median area going on. But, like I said, my Saturn, it's in Taurus, so it's sitting already in the middle, and it's already squaring, my Uranus, and it's also squaring my North Node and South Node. So it's like, it's sitting there too. It's putting something in there, and so it's adding this layer too of, it's squaring my South Node and my North Node. It's giving struggle to my South Node. It's giving struggle to my North Node, where it's just like, I think it therefore adds to the fire of the South Node, because it's living, more karmically, and it's not necessarily aiding that of the South Node. But you can think of a square as kind of like having, this is like the best comparison I can make, but I think it's a good one because it really is like this. But it's like having to do a school project with your bully. It's like, how am I going to compromise a person who fricks with me every day? I hate this person. How am I going to do a school project with them? It's really, this, it's funny when you're dealing with squares, you're really just trying to, it's where it's like finding balance in a very complicated way, which again, that was a weird way I phrased that, but it's finding balance where you're already trying to get something done, right? But but you have to work twice kind of as hard because you're working with something that doesn't quite align with you, right? You're both still schoolmates. You're both in the same class, right? But obviously you don't like each other. You're working together. You're in the same, when you're looking at a square, you're looking at the two of the same signs most of the time, unless it's on like another kind of axis where it's say like 29 degree, 1 degree kind of axis like that. But you're in the same sign, but you don't see eye to eye. You still see two sides of a 4-part spectrum, right? You see the point, but you may not see it in the same way. And so it's really, when you're looking at a square, it's like it's trying to align to look in the same direction when you both sit in two very opposing ways. I hope that made sense, but really, when you think of a square, just kind of think of that same thing where it's just like you're thinking of doing a school project with your bully. It's complicated, but you're working with your bully. There may be added layers to that too, other aspects that are in play, but for me, when I think of my Saturn, like I said before, where it's just like a lot of falling into comforts that are really blocking my ability to get stuff done. And it's really kind of aiding and abetting, more so with my Uranus than anything. But yeah, that's kind of like, I hope I've made sense so far. But when it's important to look at all those aspects, what few major, when you're looking at your chart, look at what aspects are most closely aspecting your north and your south node. If there's not any, then kind of scratch that. I guess if you don't have any aspecting your north or your south node, I'd say the next layer is looking at, the chart ruler, or not chart ruler, the ruler of your north node, and kind of going from there and seeing how much you can find through that and seeing how much relates when you do your research. Like, for instance, for me, like I said, I have a Leo north node, so my north node is ruled by the sun. And then you can therefore look at what aspects, if you have any aspects, to your sun, and understanding more of your north node through that, if you really can't, if there's not a lot or any major aspects going to your north node directly. But yeah, you can look at planets like Jupiter, right? You can look at planets, or you can look at houses like the 10th house, or even Saturn, too. Saturn is a very karmic planet, but you can understand yourself in terms of success, in terms of Saturn, or, success that comes much more long-term and farther in the future. Because Jupiter is more, consistently, or much, it doesn't take as long necessarily as Saturnian success. But sorry, I lost my train of thought. But yeah, you really, grasping the north node is just entirely, in my mind, because I've been studying it for I think I've studied the north node more than anything, and I don't think I'm putting enough justice in this mini episode. I probably should talk about it in a non-mini episode, but I would want to do a lot more hardcore research and then get a lot of backup information and just get a lot of articles to really talk about it, because the north node isn't really studied. It's studied a lot more because, you see it on a lot of major chart sites and stuff like that. But it's really funny, when I went into this pretty big astrology store in London 2 years ago, I asked the woman, because at the time I was still so interested in the north and the south node, and I asked this woman, and again, she had an entire store full of books, like walls filled, stuff like that. This was a pretty big store. And I asked her, I'm like, do you have anything on north or south nodes? And I think I may have just said north nodes, but I'm pretty sure I said both. I was like, do you have anything on north node or the nodes, as you can consider them? She's like, and she gave me this look, which I was like odd. I was like, I didn't think it was that complicated of a topic, or, I thought it was much more talked about. But she kind of gave me this face that indicated to me that she kind of didn't know what I was talking about. And she also kind of didn't know, and this was like an older woman, so I assume she's either been at the store for a while, she owned the store, or she knew a good amount, she definitely worked there. My assumption was that she owned it because, she's an older woman working there, and so I'm like thinking to myself, okay, she probably has somewhat of a big stake in this. But she gives me this look that kind of denotes, why are you looking for North Node? Like, that's kind of stupid. And I'm just like, okay, like... And I kind of just look around and then I leave. And so it's really debatable with whether or not... I think most astrologers these days think it's definitely important and definitely do a lot of studying on it. And I think you do a good amount of talking about it too. But in my mind, what I've seen, especially in my own life, in the themes in which how I find more success, or how I even find more fulfillment, really. What I find more fulfilling. It has to do with the North Node. And I think understanding the North Node and all those aspects, and how, again, what the themes are of your North Node. So again, sign, house, degree, that kind of stuff. Understanding what it is on a whole. And then understanding the aspects. So what's aiding, what's abetting. So when I mean like abetting, what's like... When I mean like aiding and abetting, I think of like a karmic planet conjunct your North Node, or more so a karmic planet conjunct your South Node, like Uranus and Saturn touching my South Node, pretty easily. It's really keeping me from that success. It's keeping more karmically. I'm doing more karmic things and doing things that I actually would fulfill me in my current life. I think my Saturn square both my nodes is really the abetting, because it's kind of keeping me from attaining balance. It's weird because it's like, since it's Saturn, it's more so karmic than helping than aiding. It's that abetting because it's like I'm falling into comforts very easily and not getting anything done. I'm very hard on myself because of that Saturnian way, and I can be a bit of a perfectionist, and it will be hard for me to get out of bed because I'm sitting in that level of perfectionism. So I'm neither necessarily doing much thinking nor much working and doing. But again, there's nuances, because you can really find balance when looking in the in-between of your South Node and North Node. But sometimes you can find a classic working with your bully situation where you have to get a project done, and you both probably, understand what's happening in the class, hopefully, but you have to do something that is not fun emotionally. So understanding, again, those aspects and what's the closest can really help you in, like I said, blocking, aiding, and abetting, or helping. Like for me, again, I have a Sun and a Mercury that are relatively close to my North Node. So my sense of self and the way I think and the way I do things are very close to giving me success anyway. But because they're not too close, like I have a Sun, like I said, at 29 degrees and a Mercury at 5 degrees. So 8 degrees or more, but they're all pretty close in the same house. So there is, some consistency there, but it's not as strong as I would hopefully want it to be. You see a lot of early, and when another way to see, a person who got success really early is seeing a Sun conjunct North Node. I think Charlie D'Amelio has one of those. You'll see a lot, I think, with people who also get success early or have a lot of consistent success, or will make a lot of money or do a lot of success early on, and then they live on that the rest of their lives. Having that, because it's like your ego, your sense of self is really already completely bathed into what you're supposed to be doing in this lifetime. You're already there. It doesn't take you a lot to stray from that. In my opinion, one of the hardest aspects to have in terms of just astrology in general, and then North nodes, is the sun opposite the North node. I think that's one of the, and especially even more so than that, sun and moon opposite North node are two of the worst placements to have. So basically, sun and moon conjunct South node. It really puts you in a pickle. I think Princess Diana had a moon conjunct South node. And it's just one of those things that it's really hard to live down. And I wouldn't be doomer if you do have those. You can definitely work with it. It's understanding what's aiding or abetting or hurting you or really helping you find that fulfillment and success in those aspects. And going from there and learning how to really take that information you learn in your birth chart and fix what you feel like you need to fix or change in your own life. So yeah, that's the North node. That's what, that's that's something I always think about. I think that I always question. And if you were wondering about the North node, or even if you haven't, I think it's something that everyone should look into, because it can really show you what you need to be doing in your lifetime to find fulfilling success. Because not all success is fulfilling, but everybody wants inner fulfillment, to feel okay, to feel satisfied at the end of the day. And that's what following North node allows you to do. Or at the very least, balancing the nodes. That's what that allows you to do. This was a little bit longer of a mini episode, but, I didn't have to do that much research. I already knew a lot about the North node in general and really had to grasp it in your own chart. But, yeah. So, I will see you on Thursday night, so about 8 p.m., for the full episode on eclipses. So, yeah. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you I'll see you alongside the stars in the next episode. Bye-bye.